on there.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to another Bob the Father. This is sort of an impromptu one, just because there's supposed to be a Bible study. Apparently, Monsignor is done with that Bible study, so I guess we're going to meet more regularly the last Tuesdays of the month. There was a question a little bit on flock notes. So if one were to, I'm going to kind of go through a tutorial how to like add yourself onto the groups that you may want to get onto. So if you go to stgabrielstl.flocknote.com, and it should automatically log you in. Otherwise, you have to use your login information. But you can get talk to Eileen if you don't know what that is. You can type your name, or it should come up like what your groups are. So your groups that you're a part of will be under the first section. So you have like my dashboard, my notes, signups, all that good stuff. And then your groups will be down here at the bottom. Now, in order to add to a group, you can actually go through these dots, and there may be one in there saying to add a group. Otherwise, you can just type your name in. So let's see, let's just use like that. And it'll come, your name will come up here in the center section. At least this is how I do it. I mean, other people might do it differently, but who knows? For some reason, I have 2 entries. That's weird. Anyway, if you go to this one, it should come up and show you everything that you're a part of in that particular group. So let's see why it's not doing that. I don't know. Weird. There it is. Okay. So you can see here you have all these groups here, and the star just means that because I'm the associate pastor, I am the admin for a lot of these groups, meaning I have like full super authority or whatever to add people and change things. But if you wanted to like add yourself to a group, you'll have a list of groups here, and you can just like add them at will, or join another group. You can hit that, and it'll show you. It'll come up with what you're not a part of, and you can actually add those. So, in order to get updates for these particular sessions, because we send these out every time we meet, it'd be good to go back into Flock Notes to make sure you're signed up for this group. And if you're not, you can add yourself on there that way. Now, some of the groups in here on our parish site. So some of these groups you'll see down here on the left-hand side at the bottom. Some of those are not open to everybody. Like for instance, parish council. So you have to be kind of on parish council to be in that group. Finance council is the same way. Even our Acts team, so they have to be part of Acts in order to actually be in that group too. So even though you can try to sign up for these, it won't let you without getting permission from a super admin or the admin for the group. So just kind of keep that in mind. So yours look a little bit different than mine would. So I'm trying to say. But if you want to get updates for anything, whether it be Friends for the Faith, whether it be our RCIA group or our Sunday sessions, even different like liturgy committee stuff. So if you're interested in what's going on with children's liturgy or ushers or all society servers, a lot of times with servers, I'll contact them through Flocknote if we need a server for like a funeral, wedding, or even something special like Easter. So, but anyone can sign up for those particular groups to see what's going on. Same thing with our school. So we got different things going on in the school that you can kind of look at. So PFA, we have our scouting. So all this stuff you can go in there and add yourself to if you so desire. So just keep that in mind. And that's kind of our little tutorial tonight for Flock Notes. So feel free to use that as much or as little as you like. And with that being said, let's open up any questions.
Well, I have a question about Zoom. Now, don't you have a code number to?
Yeah. So Zoom. So what I've done on these groups. We'll go back to those groups. So I'm not doing that. Let's see, Gabriel. There we go. If you go to like the page for the group, so if you're part of our group, let's say you're part of the Bob the Father group, so you click on Bob the Father up here on the left, and up here I have a link to the Zoom address. So up here at the top where it says Bob the Father, a weekly gathering to ask any question of faith or personal questions for your parish priest, The Zoom link is right here. I also have that under Friends, Food and Faith, as well as for our RCIA and our Sunday sessions as well. So it's all the same link for all those. So if you have it once, you'll always have it. I've also sent out emails in the past, even as a matter of fact, last week for our group, I sent out a link to the Zoom on the actual email and through a text. So those who are on the list last week have that already in their email or in their text. But if you ever lose it, you can just come to Flock Notes, click on the group, and it'll be at the top in the header, and you can either copy and paste into your server,
Okay, and what about password? Is there a same
So
password?
there's no password for this. So if you click on that link and click on it, it'll go through everything. So the only reason you'll need a password is if you were to some like phone systems require that, but that's only if you're like on a meeting phone. But if you were just downloading on your computer on your phone, it would automatically automatically set it up for you.
Okay, we need a password for my book club. That's the only Zooming I've done. I'm not crazy.
Well, also the depends too. Like, so sometimes what will happen is if the meeting hasn't started yet on Zoom, it'll ask you if you're the leader and you'll need a password.
Okay.
Right. But if the meeting's already going, you'll be able to get in right away, or you'll just have to wait until the leader starts.
I've had that before. Okay.
So yeah, that's how we have it with Zoom and with our with everything on. Yeah, Flock Notes I think is a very it's kind of a very efficient program. I found there's some issues with it as far as like the editing things, but for the most part, it's been pretty productive. I think to get information out and kind of spread the word. The only thing that's kind of with everything though, a lot of people don't necessarily look at everything either. So it's kind of, but also think a lot of people may be in the general group, but they're not necessarily in the particular small.
Well, that's what, that's what my situation was.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I've been here a long time before I ever heard of Bother the Father, because I don't scrutinize the schedule. But I find it very helpful. I wish Sam was here. Well, I'm misunderstood too, because I was thinking this was the food, fun, and friends.
Yeah, so Friends, Food, and Faith, which is this group right here. It's a separate group, but it's kind of the same. There's a lot of the same people. So you see, we have 49 members in that group.
Yeah.
And Bob the Father has 53. So we have more people who get notification about Bob the Father than Friends, Food, and Faith. The only difference is Bob the Father is every other Tuesday except for the first Tuesday of the month.
Okay.
So the first Tuesday of the month we kind of dedicate what we call Friends, Food, and Faith, and that's more of a theme directed. So it's more of a discussion on a particular topic.
Yeah, because last week you talked about the possibility of using religion as the topic, because you had been contacted about podcasts and
actually there's been a lot of questions lately about that, and it seems like there's kind of a it's more so I think it'll be directed towards why do we need a church, right? So it's kind of more discussion. I think that's going to be more the topic of discussion. That's going to go into probably more things, but I think that's what I'm kind of thinking about for next week's Friends, Food, and Faith is talking about why do we need a church. And then every other week though will be open discussions like these Father the Father, so kind of more free for all. And that's kind of the way we kind of structured it. Now I'm open to suggestion though, if people think it might be better to have like every other week or something, we could definitely discuss that. But that's kind of how we have it set up right now. And Monsignor Schamhofer was running a Bible study. I started back in September. I guess I was in the impression that it was kind of going to be a perpetual thing, but apparently it was only like a 7-week period. Okay. So that's been done. He was going to do that every last Tuesday. Well, that doesn't make any sense either, because I guess it would be 7 weeks. Okay. So so I guess the time is run out for that. And I was under the impression that it was ongoing, so I didn't realize these last Tuesdays were still open. So now it's on my calendar, and so we can start bringing those back for every last Tuesday of the month. Unless Monsignor has some other plans and wants to do something different, in which case he's the pastor, he takes precedent, that's how it goes. Okay. Good.
So I have a quick,
Yeah, Jane, go ahead.
I have a question about in the review this past week. There's an article under viewpoints, which is on, I think, page 17. A young lady was talking about various things, and then she talked about the National Eucharistic Revival, and says that she hopes that this will help establish how, quote, we do church together, meaning the young people. So I didn't know exactly, first of all, what Eucharistic revival all entails, and then secondly, how we do the church as far as the young people are concerned.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so the Eucharist revival is supposed to be starting this year, and it's supposed to run for about, I think it's 3 years, so 2026. And it's really more synodal, meaning it's really kind of just the USCCB that's getting together and discussing this. And part of that is response to these issues going on in the world about, well, what do we do with Catholic politicians who don't necessarily in the public square uphold Catholic teaching, or in many cases speak out against Catholic teaching, right? Whether it be abortion, or whether it be the death penalty, whether it be deference to the poor, the immigrant. So what is the responsibility of not only just bishops, but also priests and deacons and clergy, but also the faithful in engaging in these respects? Like, so for instance, I think we talked about this in other circumstances, like, you know, as a Catholic priest, my obligation is to protect the sanctity and the dignity, not only of the person, but also of the Eucharist, right? Which means that if I am aware that someone is in a state of mortal sin, now that's kind of very limited. You know, as far as that's, unless I see someone committing a grave sin, and that's the other thing. It may not necessarily be mortal. That's up to the person's individual conscience. So, but if I were to see someone like killing somebody right in front of me and then coming to mass, right? What is my responsibility in that circumstance, right? Now there are practical pastoral applications. So for instance, I would definitely be obligated to have a discussion with that person and say, hey, you know, you just did that. What was that all about? Do you want to go to confession? Or also, you know, based on what discussion, well, you know, maybe you should refrain from receiving the Eucharist tonight until we have another discussion, right? So, but a lot of circumstances don't open themselves up to that, right? So what then do I do as a priest if someone would present themselves in that state? And that's kind of what was the catalyst. But in a deeper level, I think it's supposed to, the purpose of it is kind of underscore and recapitulate the purpose of what the Eucharist is, who it is, the states that one should be in to receive it, the obligations that a Catholic has to uphold it, kind of bring back some understanding of what the reverence of the Eucharist should be about, and try to kind of underscore these teachings that have already been promulgated, but maybe have been not as enhanced or maybe even forgotten by a lot of generations since they've been promulgated. And so they're going through like 3-year kind of, it's more of a pastoral application. How do we engage with our, not only just Catholics, but the people at large, to help them to kind of have a deeper respect for the epitome, the source and summit of our faith. I think that's the goal. Now, as far as how we do church, well, there's been a lot of discussions about what the USCCB should do to kind of promote that respect and dignity for the Eucharist. So maybe a good thing to look, just for instance, receiving communion on the hand. That is an allowance of the USCCB, meaning the bishops here in the United States when they got together after the council, said, you know, in order to make a better, maybe more familial contact with our Lord, it would be good to receive the Eucharist in the hand. Now, before that, the Eucharist was never received in the hand except for by clergy, right? It was received on the tongue. There is kind of some, how should I put it? There's some people that are kind of advocating to go back to that. So in other words, get rid of having communion in the hand and just receive communion on the tongue. I think there's arguments really both sides that are good for receiving on the hand or receiving on the tongue. And so I don't know if that's going to be something practically that the USCB will look at and say, yeah, you know, we're going to remit that allowance and just receive on the tongue. I don't know. That's kind of what the purpose of this revival is going to be, to figure out what's the best way to enhance the dignity and the respect of the Blessed Sacrament, and also help people understand it, what they're doing when they're receiving it, and really how they should receive our Lord. So that's what that's all about. That's kind of the purpose of it. Yeah. That's what it's directed towards. And it's going to be a 3-year process, so we'll see what happens.
Then she also says, help us to help establish how, quote, we do church.
Well, I think that's kind of part of it, right? So the part of it, how we do, I mean, that's more of a colloquial way of saying how we worship, right? I think that's kind of what they're getting, which I don't know this person out, I didn't read it, so I don't really know for sure. But that sounds to me like this person is trying to say, we're trying to understand in a better way how to worship, how to celebrate the Mass, how to participate in the Mass. That's my charitable assumption what that would mean. No one is advocating. Here's the thing: the USCCB cannot change how we celebrate Mass.
Yeah, but yeah,
right. I mean, they can maybe what they could change is maybe use of vernacular compared to Latin or something, or maybe even advocate in other languages here, like use of Spanish more. They could do that, but as far as like how the Mass is celebrated, they cannot change the rubric of the universal church.
Yeah, right.
A group of bishops cannot do that, which is why even the German Synod was critiqued in many ways, because it seemed like that's what they're trying to do. And they can't. They don't have that authority.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions, comments?
I do.
Yeah.
Have one. Okay. I've read a few different things about hosts being stolen and spirited away for a big satanic convention or something. But I remember you saying, I think at one of these meetings that I watched online, or maybe you told me, that the recipient must be worthy for the communion to be valid, for Christ to be in that host.
No. So once the host is consecrated, it's Jesus.
So it can be defiled.
Of course it can. Now, to be a valid recipient, so in other words, to receive the graces, you have to be in a state to receive them, right? So, but it also means that, but once that host is, once the word said, "This is my body, this is my blood," that's Jesus, said by the priest or bishop. So yeah, no, it can surely be defiled, and unfortunately, we've actually found, even in our church, hosts, assuming consecrated, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't be, but sometimes you find them in the music books. Sometimes you find them on the floor in the pews. And so we definitely repose of Jesus properly in those instances, or because we're not sure, we assume that they're consecrated and we repose them.
All right, if I would find one in the songbook and you're gone,
right?
Could I take it?
If you so desire. I
mean,
by that time, I don't know about you, but a lot of times when we find them, they're very.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also make the argument they're already corrupted. Once they become corrupted, the essence of Christ leaves.
Okay.
Right. But just to be sure, we definitely still take proper precaution.
So by corrupted, you mean dirty?
I mean that becomes moldy, or so once like for instance, once the bread becomes moldy, the matter becomes moldy, it's no longer valid.
All right.
Right, but just in case, we typically would do so in your circumstance. Yeah, you could consume. I wouldn't advise that because there's health issues.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
but what you could do is up on next to the tabernacle, there's a little jar of water, called an ablution dish.
Oh.
And so what you could do is just put it in that dish and
Oh,
just let it dissolve,
okay.
right? Because that's what would happen otherwise if we didn't have what we call a sacrarium, which is a sink that goes into the ground. Typically, if we had found, we just put in the sacrarium, put some water in it, let it go down to the ground and dissolve.
Into the ground, you mean dirt, earth, not
the earth.
sewer?
No, not yet. It's into the actual earth.
Okay.
Barring that, because the sacrament is locked, you could put it in that ablution dish and just let it dissolve. Usually it takes
Okay.
about 24 hours, or if that.
Well, if you find anything in it, you're gonna deal with it.
Yes, of
properly,
course, right, exactly. So, I mean, so that's what you could do if you're just there and you find it. But yeah, I mean, but that's a desecration. And there's questions about like, well, who would do that? Why? As a matter of fact, boy, we had a conversation with the 7th grade last year about that, because apparently some of the 7th graders just taking the Eucharist back to the pew, and then they would just like put it in the. They didn't know. They didn't know. There was an ignorance there, I think. I would hope. But we had to be very clear. It's like, no, you don't do that, right? If you're not going to receive, don't receive. If you're not in a state to receive, don't receive. You don't have to come up, right?
Mhm.
Now there's discussion about whether, sometimes. Let's put it this way. I had a time when I was over in the school and I had a discussion with a certain grade about, again, this that we're talking about. What is the proper disposition to receive the Eucharist, right? So we talked about, to be baptized, you have to believe what we believe, and you have to be in a state of grace, right? And so we started about, mortal sin and what that means, all this stuff, and then a lot of kids started to realize, like, oh wow, I might be in a state of mortal sin. I was like,
Well,
okay,
that's what I was thinking,
Right.
because they all seem to go. I only saw one kid,
right.
and I don't even know, maybe he wasn't
They
even
went,
Catholic.
they probably.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's sort of like, well, okay. And so we had the discussion, and there was like a light bulb moment. Oh, okay. And I even told them, like, even in school, if you're not in the state, you don't have to come up. Or if you do, you can just cross your hands. That's okay. No one's gonna think less of you. I'm not gonna think, I won't even notice probably. I was shortly after that, I was at a mass, and there was and I don't know if it's the same class or not, but these kids were staying in the pew, and the teacher was like, come on. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is, I think we get into this mindset of just come up. And I think for me, what was very telling about that was when I was still living in Charleston. This is right before I moved back to St. Louis to start studying for the priesthood. I was going to mass every day, and on this particular day, I had kind of an odd schedule there, because certain masses were late enough in the day where I could kind of go, because my work usually started at 5:30 in the morning, so it wasn't like making an early mass. And one mass would be in the evening, and then one mass would be like in the morning. I asked my boss, well, whatever. One of the days though, because there was a holy day, the mass schedule was all mixed up. And so the only time I get to mass was 7 o'clock at night. And the 7 o'clock at night mass happened to be the Spanish mass. So it was Our Lady of Guadalupe. So obviously a big holy day for the Spanish community. So I was like the only Anglo out of all these Spanish people. And it's like 1,000 people there. I mean, it was packed. It was wall to wall. And what was interesting is when it came time for communion, I got up and I was kind of at the end of the pew, like towards the end of the aisle, and nobody else got up. And so I was like, oh, so I was just like, I kind of was kneeling, waiting for people to move, and no one did. And the priest started distributing communion. There's about 10 people that got up and go receive communion out of like 1,000. And I was just like, that's so odd. I don't get this. So after mass, and after mass, it was actually kind of amazing. They had this kind of ceremony and this dancing, and it was sort of like representative. I was talking to the priest in the back, and he was telling me what it all symbolized, and it was actually kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
But I asked him about like the whole community. It's like, hey, Father, what's the deal? And he said, oh, well, none of these people got to go to confession. And I was like, what? It's like, yeah, they didn't get to go to confession, so they didn't come up for communion because they weren't in a state of grace. And I was like, oh. But what it really struck for me was that the importance that it was, right?
Yeah.
To be in that
except
state to receive.
It makes you wonder how available confession was
Oh, and it was.
to them.
Oh, it was.
Oh.
So but that's what I'm saying though. But it's not that the point was that it was available. It was the fact that they respected the Eucharist so much
Well,
that they realized they shouldn't have gone up if they haven't gone to confession yet.
yeah,
And I thought that was really kind of profound,
yeah.
you know.
And maybe, I think, Our Lady of Guadalupe is quite cultural also,
Mhm.
because I think, Mexicans
Right.
are very different than we are. They have parades in the street for
Yeah.
every Saint's Day.
But it wasn't just, so my point is, it was just that day. I came to find out that even, and I've actually, since working at the Wentzville and St. Patrick's, they had a Sunday mass there in Spanish too, in the afternoon. And the same thing applied, that if the people that came to that mass, about 150 Hispanic people, if they didn't go to confession that week, they would not come up. And so it was one of these things where just like, that's what the understanding of what's happening here.
Yeah.
And so I that's always kind of stuck with me. And I thought that was very profound. I tried to kind of, I think we need that more in the Anglo community, kind of
Yeah,
understanding like
and
what
maybe
this
the
is.
pastor of a church like that should say, I'm going in that box and I'm not leaving until I've seen every member of
Well,
the parish.
So the problem is you can't compel.
That won't work.
Yeah. You can't compel anyone to go to confession. I
Oh,
can't say
but
you better
there's
come in here. I can't
But
do
they're
that.
just missing out. I mean, they just,
Yeah, right.
that's really a shame because, I mean, they need it.
Well, I
And
mean, the
they
fact is,
deserve it
well,
if
yeah,
they're that.
I mean, the fact is, we all
devout.
do. The fact is, we all do. I mean, the amount of this, I will say, this parish, St. Gabriel, I think we give more confession time than any other parish I've served in, even as a seminarian. The
Mhm.
fact we have confessions in the morning, we have confessions now on Wednesday nights, we have confessions now on Saturday evening.
Oh, you're still doing the Wednesday night? I thought that was,
It's on the bulletin.
okay.
So
I thought that was for Advent.
nope,
Okay,
it started before Advent,
great.
actually. Yeah.
Did it? Yeah, I did.
So
Yeah.
so the fact we do that, I think there's plenty of opportunity, but how many people actually come? And to that point, yeah, it's like we can preach and talk about the importance of the sacrament. Now there's other school of thought of like, well, are people actually in a state of mortal sin? Now that's a good question. I don't know. Right? Mortal sin, there's three aspects of that
Yeah.
I can't tell. Only the person that does it can tell.
Yeah.
So but again, I think we've kind of lost the understanding of what grave matter is too.
Yeah. I don't know that everybody knows. I don't know that I know.
Well, I mean, I
When
think you see that primarily in the third commandment. I mean, we talk about the Sunday obligation. Now,
Yeah.
there are circumstances, and actually, we just talked about this RCA this past weekend about the first three commandments. And there are instances where, you would be exempt, if you're providing a service all day and you can't be there,
Right.
you're exempt. If there's a weather phenomenon that doesn't allow you, or your life is at risk,
Yeah.
or there's an illness,
Yeah.
you're exempt in those circumstances.
Yeah.
Even if you're just providing acts of charity for a neighbor, you're exempt. Now, I'm not charitably, I'm saying, when I see the amount of people that come to mass compared to the people that we have registered in the parish, maybe people are going somewhere else. That's a possibility. If you look at the scatter chart,
I think all the churches say that though.
well, if you look at the scatter
Right.
charts from all things, I think that was actually a very interesting data plot that was given by the Archdiocese. It showed the people that lived in a boundary and the churches they went to. And if you look at South City, it's almost like a kaleidoscope. So, I mean, okay, people are going other places. We know that.
Mhm.
Is that everybody? Like take the school, for instance. A third of our parish, a third of our parishioners live outside the boundary, even though they're parishioners. So they live outside the boundary of St. Gabriel, but they're registered here.
Mhm.
Okay. 2/3 live inside the boundary and registered here. So that means we have a third that could be going somewhere else because they're in a particular boundary.
Mhm.
We have another third that typically come to mass on a regular basis on Sunday, or at least semi-regularly. Then we have another third where are they? Again, the charitable assumption is they're going somewhere. But then you start talking to the children and you realize, oh, mom and dad aren't taking you to mass.
Mhm.
Okay. Is that a sin for the children? Depends. Can they get the mass on their own? Most of the younger ones probably not. But yet, maybe if they come up here and play on the playground, that's more tricky. But do the parents know? Like, do they have an understanding that the Sunday obligation is that's obligation on Sunday? Because a lot of arguments you hear, and actually Father Mayo has heard this quite often over at St. Raphael, because they go to mass every day. They don't do it the same way we do at St. Gabriel, but they have mass every day. And the argument he gets from all the parents over there is, well, Father, my children are going to mass every day. Why do I have to go on Sunday? Because they're already going all day, right? So so I can understand if it was just like, I can understand that argument in some ways, but also that's a complete lack of understanding of what the obligation is. And when we say obligation, what we mean obligation, I mean there's actually you have a responsibility, you have and also a right, but also like an opportunity. Right?
Well, it's a family. It should be a family endeavor. I mean, my dad always took us, and it was a thing. I mean,
see, that's true. Now it's interesting though, like when I got to a certain age, actually after my first communion, I actually enjoyed going to mass by myself. Now, again, I understand, yeah, of course, it's good that families, but also it was instilled in me very early on, and even after that was, hey, that's what we do. We don't have to go together, but you're going at some point during the day. If you're going to live here, that's what's going to happen, right? He was a guy who started working. Okay, you got to work, fine. Find time to go to mass. As long as you have an opportunity to go, you're going. Even if that means you wake up at 6:30 and go to the 7 o'clock mass, fine. Yeah. That was something we grew up with, and I think right. And I think it wasn't, now for me personally, I don't think it really was until I got in college that I really appreciated it. And the reason I think I appreciate it is because I wasn't like, way far away from home, but I was far enough away where I couldn't go home every day, or at least every week. And so even though in the newness of everything going on, new people, new school, new place to live, you're living, what was foundational for me was church.
Yeah.
Because I walk into the Catholic Church down in Rolla, Missouri, and it's like, oh, I know what this is. I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I know what's happening.
Yeah.
And it was a touchstone all throughout my college career as a place of that familiarity and that permanence. And I recognize that. I don't know if that's happening anymore, if other people do or not.
I don't know, but in Rolla, there wasn't a Catholic church on every corner, that's for sure.
There was one for the entire time. It was a small town. And it was still within walking distance. It was about a mile away. I
was in Southeast Missouri for something. It was visiting a friend, but and I said, I want to go to mass on Sunday. And one of the women, we were having coffee. This was right after my friend and I just got there. And she said, well, what religion? And I said, I'm Catholic. She says, oh, we knew one of them once. And Lee said that's kind of the way it is down here. And so we found a church. It was before the WWW, but they found me at church. But yeah, that's what my brother said. He said you weren't gonna find a whole lot of Catholics down there.
Yeah, I mean, down in South Missouri, I think Church of Christ is really big. You see a lot of those churches around. But yeah, the Catholics there are 66 parishes in southern Missouri for 66,000 Catholics.
Wow.
I think it's the biggest geographically, but I think it's the smallest in population in the state of Missouri.
When are they going to publish the list of churches they're going to close in St. Louis or in the Archdiocese?
So maybe give a little update. So Thursday, for everyone watching, there is the meeting for the priests. Like we had one back in August where they kind of rolled out the different plans they were having for all these plan areas. So they're having another one on Thursday for the priests where they're going to give the final plans for each planning area. We just had a deanery meeting last week where one of the vicars general was there, And he indicated that there was no plan to sell off any property.
Well, that's good.
Yes, that's not to say there won't be, but I think the plan going forward after these are rolled out, it'll be to turn up the individual parishes, meaning the pastors with under consultation with finance council, parish council, all that good stuff, to make determinations on which is what would be the most feasible, what would be the most efficient, what would be the best way to handle the properties. So what would that look like? Well, let's say, for instance, here in our boundary here for St. Gabriel, all the models had us merged with Rayfields and Sorrows. The other question was what the other parish would be? Magdalene, would it be JP2? My guess would be more Magdalene. I don't know that for sure. We'll find out Thursday. But they could have a completely different plan. I mean, based on the input that came in from the KPL, the key parish leaders, and after the listening sessions, maybe someone had a different plan in mind that might work. But let's say, for instance, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that those three parishes for sure are combining with Magdalene. Okay, that's our new parish. It's those four boundaries now we combine to one, and now we have 4 churches within that boundary. Okay, we're going to start looking now at what we do with the different priests. So probably there are going to be new pastors at every parish, I would imagine. In which case, the new pastor would be in consultation with the current pastors, see what's going on. Once they get installed, okay, now what do we do?
Why would there be a new pastor?
I think that would be prudent, and just because what they want to try to avoid. Would someone else have a comment? Oh, sorry. Okay. I think what they want to try to avoid is winners and losers. So in other words, let's say if Monsignor Schamleffer remains the pastor of this new parish.
Mm-hmm.
What that communicates is, oh, well, Gabriels is actually, they're really the main parish. And the rest of you guys will have to figure out what you're going to do, but we're going to be still intact and everything here. I think it takes away some of the subjectivity, right? I think that's a wise and prudent thing to do. Now, that's not to say, what about continuity? Because that makes sense too. You want to have some kind of someone probably here in place that knew what happened before the merging, kind of had some understanding. Well, does that mean that Father Madden is going to stick around for 2 more years? Maybe. Does that mean maybe they take like a Father Fallon or a Father Mayo, or let's say Monsignor Schamleffer, and make them a senior associate in this area? Maybe, right? I don't know. That has not been determined yet. The priest personnel board will probably figure that out over the next few months and make determinations, then submit those to the Archbishop. He'll have the final say, and then they'll start making changes sometime. I don't know. But so we have a new pastor come in. He looks at these 4 churches and says, okay, well, Gabriels has they need some work, but they're pretty good as far as structure wise, and they're pretty sustainable. So we probably leave that church as is. Okay, Rayfields, it's a little bit smaller, but hey, it's still got some good bones. Maybe we can, leave it as is, who knows. Okay, we got these 2 schools. Ooh, does it make sense to keep them just separate? Do we make it one school, maybe like a pre through 3 and a 4 through 8? Maybe that makes sense, whatever.
Well, you said before that Gabriels would not hold
more
schools.
Right.
So you would kind of break it up probably by grade.
Possibly. I mean, again, this is all. I'm saying these are all potential things.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at that. Great. Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Well, Sorrows. Oof. It's a beautiful church. Oh boy, that school building is also. They're not doing so great, but they have a good gym. Okay. Well, maybe what you do is sell off the school building. And maybe do something with that. Maybe renovate it, turn it into condos or something, or housing, who knows, whatever. Okay, Magdalene. Whoa, boy, Magdalene. Well, financially speaking, I'm not saying this is the case. Just be clear. I don't know what the case is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's say they look at one of these parishes and say, okay, oh boy, they are in the hole. They have a lot of debt. Okay, and there's only like 15 people going to that church right now, and they're so close to Sorrows. Oh boy, maybe the best thing just to kind of close that church and then sell off the
Oh,
property.
I was thinking of the one on Brentwood, not,
No, I'm talking about
Wow,
Church of the Magdalene on
okay.
Kings Highway.
yeah, okay.
So all that will have to be determined by the new pastor, whoever that may be.
Now, St. James has turned the convent into a preschool.
Mhm.
And it looks to me like they've made a meeting center out of the school,
Great.
which is beautiful. I mean, it's got all those windows. It'd be great for a convention to move in there. When I went to conventions, they had all kinds of different programs
Mhm.
that you signed up for. So that would be ideal, but do they bring in enough money to support the church?
Well, and see, I don't know if that's really going to be the main driving factor, because the other thing that people understand is, this has been a big question for people. The money follows the people, right? So in other words, when these boundaries happen, it's not just like the money from St. Gabriel to St. Gabriel. That money is all pulled together for that entire region
Mhm,
to fund the needs of all the people that are there,
mhm.
right? So same thing. I mean, at St. James, for instance, like, okay, well, we're actually financially pretty sound,
Mhm.
and we're not necessarily making money out of this, but this could be a good place for the entire parish to use for whatever function, maybe baptisms or weddings or whatever. And we can maybe have some kind of small fee for parishioners. I mean, for outside people, charge them a little more or whatever to use this space.
Yeah,
Maybe.
but I think one of your problems, if they tried to do that, is my family has been in St. James since it started.
Mhm.
We're always going to at least be buried there.
Yeah.
I think I might be the last
Well, yeah,
funeral
listen,
to bury there.
what I'm saying, Chris, is right now there's nothing saying that St. James can't remain open, but like,
Yeah.
okay, but does that mean they're gonna have a mass there every day? Probably not.
No, they don't now.
Well, but could they have a mass like maybe once a month? Right? I mean, same thing with ours, like, okay, well, over these let's say we keep all these churches open here in this boundary.
Yeah,
Well, maybe Magdalene will at least have like a mass there maybe once every 2 weeks.
yeah.
Maybe Sorrows might have once a week. I don't know. Maybe we'll have the Sunday masses here and at Sorrows.
But that's a big plant to take care of for a mass
Well,
once a month.
yeah, but also too, I mean, the question is it sustainable? And so that's really
Right.
well, these questions have to be answered, right? And there's the
Now-
practical aspect, and there's a spiritual aspect.
At St. James, we didn't have air conditioning.
Mm.
Well, nobody did in the olden days, and
They have it there now, though.
oh, I guess they do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
They-
yeah.
I guess they
Pretty
do.
sure. Because I was assigned there, pretty sure.
Yeah, people would be dying, because
Yeah.
we almost did, and we were
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think that until a lot more people die off, you're gonna have, the sentiment is gonna be the big hurdle.
Well, true, but I think the other wisdom in keeping these places as is in some ways, and maybe not all of them, but a few, is there also could be a potential for a population shift.
Well, that's what I'm kind of getting that you think, but I don't know.
And I don't know, that's what I'm saying, I don't know either.
Because when we were kids, we went to the 8:30 mass, because that's when the sisters were there. So if your parents didn't bring you, you had to sit with your class. So sister could watch over you. And I don't know what we did after my dad died, because Bill was only 6. But I guess the 4 of us went together because mom she always went to 7 and was home with the baby. And, had what there was of peace and quiet in that house for that hour. And, but that mass was full,
Mhm.
and the 10 o'clock mass was full. And, 7 had a lot of people there.
Right.
Because there came a time when I wanted the newspaper all to myself, so I went to 7 o'clock mass. The the newspaper to bed with me and hid it under my covers until I was finished with it.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
I don't, you really just don't see that. I mean, and that's not just an issue of number of Catholics anymore, just number of people in general in the city. I mean, we've seen a consistent decrease in population over the last 50 years.
Yeah,
And so is there, now, what's interesting though, is a lot of areas are building new like structures and townhouses and stuff. And it's like, there's actually a plan right now downtown the riverfront, where the current, where Our Lady Queen of Victories is, to redevelop that area, make it more commercial space and livings. But now, okay, but who's moving in there,
yeah,
right? The same like on the hill, it's like there's a lot of stuff going on there, but who's moving in there?
yeah,
Or for everyone you have move in, is there someone moving out? I mean, so there's big questions about that, I think. And that's, and I think there's kind of a hope that eventually there might be a turn of the tide and you'll have more people coming in the city. I mean, that's why they're doing it. But again, that's gonna have to be discerned at the local level. And they're gonna have to make this determination on a parish by parish basis, I think. And that's, in some ways, that's the wisdom of doing it this way, because you are letting the people that's there decide, make those determinations. And I think that's one of the reasons why they did it this way, is because they want people to have a say, and they don't want anyone to say they didn't have an opportunity to say something. Right? Because I don't think you can say that you didn't have the opportunity to put your input.
oh, yeah, I
Right,
agree with
right.
that.
So
Yeah,
I think this decision based on all that input, and I think it's prudent, because that seems like what most people were wanting. Like, I did analysis for a planned area down in Franklin County, and what was very fascinating is that, we have a lot of rural parishes out there, that be big areas, one church in one big area, and everyone wants their church to remain open. And it's like, sure you do, I get it, because you don't want to drive another 45 minutes, we're only driving 35 now. So it makes sense in those areas to keep those places open, because, well, yeah, this is my church and this is the closest one to me, so it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
less of a burden on them. I don't know if you can make that argument in the city.
well, they're elderly people
Sure.
who walk
Sure.
still
Sure.
and shouldn't be driving at all, so driving to church,
Fair. Yeah.
is.
But I mean, but I think that's just thing, is that this is just gonna be a way, I think it's also a way to make a determine in the law of subsidiarity, to say, okay, we can kind of make our own determination.
Mhm.
And the other thing too is more canonical, because the other issue is, it's easier to change a parish than it is to change a church.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So what I mean by that is, in order to change the name of a church, to suppress it, to profane it, is what they say. That would have to come from Rome. Right? Because of the consecrations, because of the rites of going to actually.
So that's what
dedicate the
happened
church.
with St. George?
Well, the St. George is interesting. I don't know exactly the title, and maybe Mickey might know, she's gone. But I'm not sure if it's St. George Church in the parish of John Paul II. Or if they went through that whole process to get the name changed to John Paul II
My
Church.
cousin, does the overnight vigils there. And in fact, the pastor's, father did it before, the hour before her, and was coming kind of sweet on Carol. So
Okay.
anyway, but she serves there,
Mhm.
and she calls it John Paul II, the church.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know all the
It's
details.
like
of
I
that.
told you,
Yeah.
it's a giant
Yeah.
orange building. It should belong to a dragon slayer.
But what that would say though, as far as like we're concerned, so let's say we kept all the churches open, it would be St. Gabriel Church in the parish of Our Lady Queen of Angels, let's say. I don't know. Whatever determination they come with the parish name. But
Yeah,
that's how it would be, how it would be titled.
yeah.
So I don't know. That's a whole another situation needs to be determined. But that's,
Well, who makes the rules in the church on marriages and so forth? And I'll tell you what I'm thinking of. In 86, my brother and sister-in-law bought a house on Murdoch
Mhm.
within hopping distance of St. Gabriel,
yeah,
and they wouldn't let them get married here
okay.
because they hadn't lived here 6 months.
That is a pastoral decision.
Okay, because he moved in
Mhm.
right away,
Yeah,
but she didn't move in until the wedding. And
Yeah.
of course, St. James welcomed them.
Right.
They got married at St. James.
Yeah,
Pillsbury.
that is at the pastoral discretion. So like, because like here, like for instance, a lot of the couples that come to me, there really is no connection to the parish.
Mhm.
It's just they like the church, or there may be some like distant connection, like maybe their grandparents married her or something.
Mhm.
So that is a pastoral decision. So it's like, well, because what you're really saying is, okay, you want to be married here, which means you want to be part of the community here.
Mhm.
Okay, well, how are you doing that? What are you doing to be part of that community?
Mhm.
Do you live in the boundary? Well, no. Okay, well, you plan to move in the boundary? Well, maybe. Well, do you want to send your kids to school here? I mean, so those questions really are pertinent.
Yeah.
But also to establish what we call canonically domicile. Domicile is dependent on the permanent resident. So in other words, what canon law would dictate is if you have a permanent residence within a boundary, you are automatically the parishioner of that boundary,
Mhm.
right? So was it wrong for that pastor to tell your brother? No. Canonically speaking, yeah.
Well, he had. I mean,
Mhm.
they were looking, and every time they made an appointment to see something, it was sold.
Right.
But they bought a place. I think it was spring, and they were getting married in the fall. But I mean, they bought the house.
Right.
And so by the time
Yeah.
he was living there.
Yeah.
So it was his parish, but not long enough.
Okay. Yeah. And so what I would say is there's certain, so there are, when we talk about these kind of obligations, there are like Rome rules, there are Lindell rules, which are the archdiocese, and there's parochial, or I would say my rules, right?
Okay.
So the Roman rules, those you can't change. That means you have to, the sacrament is given by Jesus Christ. There are certain requirements for that. So in other words, you can't violate them. The local or the ordinarial rules, which are like the ones in the archdiocese. So one of the instances for those would be in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, you have to be engaged for at least 6 months and contact your priest before your wedding. So what that means is you have to have at least 6 months of formation before your wedding date, and that's a requirement that comes from the archdiocese.
Well, they had pre-Cana conferences.
Well,
What they used to call
just give me examples of what that would be. So, like for instance,
Oh.
that wouldn't necessarily be the case in every diocese around the world.
Okay.
But if here in St. Louis, it's been determined by our authority that 6 months seems like a good time to do that preparation.
Okay.
Then there are parochial rules. So it's like, for instance, that would look like something like, okay, you have a videographer, maybe. Okay, well, there's a contract that videographer has to sign to make sure they don't damage or get in the way. Maybe that also looks like, like things we have here at St. Gabriel, like we can't have rice, there's no runners, so that's more of a safety thing.
Yeah.
Right. So those would be more parochial rules, which don't really come from the archdiocese. So like certain things like I do when I have formation with a couple may be different than like what Monsignor does. Right. So like you heard of there's a thing called the focus survey, right? I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I've heard the word focus.
Yeah, well, focus, this is
where-
different focus than like the college
Something
focus.
something in the Sunday Visitor would
Okay.
call it self-focus.
So it's kind of just a questionnaire, and it helps to deepen discussion of like, differences and compatibility, right? So it's not like a test, but there's questions on there. It's like, they'll have a statement say, do you agree or disagree, or are you undetermined, right?
Okay.
And so what happens is, both the bride and the groom fill this out, and they kind of just compare what they agreed upon, what they didn't agree upon, and then we'll kind of open up deeper discussions, right?
Yeah.
There are certain things in that survey that I would probably focus on that other guys wouldn't, or using that all together is not necessarily a requirement. So would I use that? I don't necessarily have to. Other parishes may not use that either. Like another example that would be like archdiocese requires you to go through what they call a formal process. So what that means is you have to go through some kind of seminar or retreat, or even on parochial level, some kind of formal program. And then also have to do a natural family planning course, right? 1 hour. That's from the archdiocese. Now, from a parochial standpoint, well, how do I do this formal process? Well, that's kind of up to me. So like one thing we have here in St. Gabriel that other parishes don't necessarily have is we have mentor couples. Where we kind of pair up the couples with another couple that's established in the parish that's been married for at least 10 years, they have kids, and they're living their faith, right? And so we pair them and say, you know, talk to them. They can give you some insights that I can't, like what does it mean to like have a joint checking account, you know, or raising kids, that kind of stuff. That suffices as a formal process, right? So we meet that requirement, we're doing it at a parochial level, and that can be determined by the pastor. So I say that just because, yeah, there's certain things that we cannot change at all, right? So in other words, you have to exchange vows. That has to happen, right? That's something that can't change. Now, other things though can be dispensed in our Shatzen level. Like for instance, where do you have to have a wedding in a church? Well, if you're baptized Catholic, yes, but that can be dispensed by the bishop at his discretion. And for good reason. What would that good reason be? Well, let's say you're getting married to a non-Catholic, and that non-Catholic's dad is a minister in their particular faith.
That was my cousin.
Okay, you come to the priest, say, hey, you know what? My future spouse, their dad is a minister in this faith, and you know he really wants to witness our marriage, and all right.
Well, my cousin's daughter, there was some big snafu. I don't know what the turmoil was, but her fiance, his annulment didn't come through. He had been married, not in the Catholic Church, but he had been married.
Yeah, right.
And it didn't come through. And
you mean like it just didn't come through in time, or it came back? It came back. Okay, all right. Yeah.
And so his father was minister. He's gone now, he died. But he married them at the Jewel Box. Now, my brother and sister-in-law got married in a park, and it was just beautiful. It was the children were hanging upside down from the monkey bars watching the wedding. It was in the grass, and we banked it with flowers. And Mark said, now I rented chairs for the faithful. For the old people is what Fred did.
Yeah.
And it was in the summer, and it was, you know, they dressed not wedding dressy, but formally, and then changed, and we had a big picnic. Well, then after marrying into our family, she became a Catholic. I don't know if it was the influence or the craziness in the family. I don't know. Yeah. So their second wedding, her cousin married them. He's a minister. Well, so one night after work, they got married at Holy Innocents.
Yeah.
Not Holy Innocents, Epiphany, where she did her formation.
Validation. They had the validation.
And that wasn't nearly as religious as the one in the park.
Wow.
It was just pretty quick and simple.
They're kind of supposed to be. I mean, it was just
that. It was just her family and us.
They're not, I mean, typically, if you look at really the rites of the wedding ceremony are not that ornate.
No.
They're not. I mean, so it's really it's supposed to be very simple and very kind of like, man.
But he did a couple readings and, you know, but it was nice. It was just her mother and Granny and one of her sisters, and then us, Mark's.
Tell the truth, I think those are the most beautiful ones. And the reason why is because, like, for instance, my sister got married during COVID. And so it was just immediate families. Were the two witnesses, them, me, my brother-in-law's mom and dad, and his brother was the best man, his wife. My sister was my sister's maid of honor, and we had my sisters and my mom and dad and their spouses and kids, and it was beautiful because it was focused on what really matters. Right? That's the whole thing. Is what really matters. And you know, this thing, like we have, you know, validations are kind of interesting for me because it's kind of, they're also kind of tricky because the question I always ask myself when a married couple comes in, especially if they already have kids, it's like, well, what should I have you do? Right? Because especially if you've been together for a long time now, I mean, you probably know more about marriage than I do as far as that's concerned, what it means to live it, or it means most of the couples we have in our parish. Definitely probably more than the couples we have coming in there, fresh. So that's always kind of a struggle because like, well, I don't really know what to tell you, right? I don't know. I mean, we talk about the theology behind marriage and what that means. Regardless, we also talk about how to pray typically as a couple. But then as far as the practical stuff, it's like, well, we can kind of dispense with that. But I think the problem typically runs into is that people don't even think about it, right? So when it talks about like like marriage, it's like, yeah, let's go and do whatever we want to do. It's our wedding.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I
right?
mean, some of it is
Yeah,
just really horsed up.
yeah. I mean, so that's kind of the struggle is that it's not. It's funny. I was talking to the fifth graders a couple weeks ago about we're talking about marriage. They're talking about the sacraments right now. We're talking about marriage, and I don't know how we got on the topic, but I started saying it's like, well, so let's say you guys grow up and you meet a guy or a girl, and you're really enamored with them, and you fall in love with them, and turns out they're not Catholic. What do you do? Oh, what do you mean? It's like, what do you mean, fall in love? Well, what do? Do you get married? Well, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, okay, how? Right, so we get that discussion, right? So what does that mean? Can you guys just go off to wherever they want to go and do it? Well, okay, well, let's say they want to do that, right? They don't want to go to the Catholic Church. Can you still get married in that church? I mean, it's like, well, I mean, I want to say yes, but it's like, well, the thing what I try to communicate to them is all you gotta do is come talk to the priest.
Yeah,
That's all you have to do. That's it.
yeah.
We'll help you, right? If you want to get married in a Lutheran church or even in the park, whatever it is, as long as you have good reason,
Yeah.
we can dispense with that.
Well, and Mark wasn't so much in the church at that time.
Right.
I think he always felt he was Catholic, and fortunately, he went full on back to the church before he died. But that's another thing I wanted to ask about. But my mother, when they did pre-Cana conferences, they got married in 50. It was everything.
Yeah.
Finances.
Oh, yeah.
I think they still called it sex then.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Not just.
And we talk about that stuff too. But
Euphemism.
Yeah. We talk about that stuff too, but it's just
The marital embrace.
Yes.
I don't think she ever heard that word.
Conjugal act. Or yeah, right.
I was surprised some of the new euphemisms, but and I told you what I think of the same-sex attraction
Yeah.
for people who really feel they have a vocation. But I wanted to ask, I'm always in search of this plenary indulgence.
Right.
And I have a list.
Sure.
If I can get to Father Chris Alar's status and get one every day, I have about 365 people.
Great.
So now, does it suffice for only sins that have been confessed?
Okay, so let me get straight. What you're asking is, let's say I just got out of the confessional. I've received communion, I pray for the Pope, I've maintained the detachment from temporal.
For that
time
half
period,
hour.
Right? Well, yeah. that's the tricky thing about it, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So let's say I go the next day and I take a pen out of the purse of my neighbor and I was going to put it back, but they broke away, and now okay. Venial sin, probably, I would say. Still a sin nonetheless, because you didn't ask permission, fine. Would you have to go confess that again? Confess that before you actually.
And would that be a mortal sin?
Well, see, it's a mortal sin if you had full knowledge and did it anyway. You had full consent.
Oh, gee,
So here's the thing, right? So if let's say I'm like, oh man, I forgot this check out real quick. Oh, okay, well, and then you had the intention of putting it back, but then the person left. The sin isn't the fact that you actually took it. The sin is the fact you actually took it without permission, right? And so I didn't intend to do that, but the circumstance I was in was a cause for an emergency. It was still wrong of me to take it, but I intended to give it back, and I'm going to try everything I can to do that, right? That would probably fall under the realm of venial, Right, so mortal would be like, well, I know I shouldn't take this pen, I know it'd be wrong to do that, and I probably shouldn't, I probably should find a way to do this, but screw
It is a nice pen.
it. It's a nice pen, and boy,
If it's one of these pens,
and maybe this person doesn't even deserve this pen. Oh, okay, right. Right, so that gets in the moral realm because you know what you're doing it anyway,
yeah,
right? So we commit venial sins all the time,
yeah,
right? Now the sacrament of the Eucharist does absolve you of those. So you have to confess any mortal sin you have in your soul.
yeah,
But how often do you do that? Well, as often as mortal sin, but also typically if you confess within 21 days, you're still meeting the requirement, so to speak, of the plenary indulgence. But if you have mortal sin, you have to confess that. So in other words, if you, let's say, I don't know, killed a guy out of in
yeah, a
cold
lot of
blood.
people running around.
Well, I'm just trying to get the point across, right? So
For people outside asking for alms.
So I'm killing a guy. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I just wanted to feel whatever it was. I do that, and the next day comes around. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna. I can't get the confessional day. I can't do that, right? Well, obviously, there's not a plenary indulgence that day because you have that state of mortal sin, right? And even the next day until you actually confess it, right?
Well, now I had something yesterday. I'm trying to decide if I need to confess. Sunday night when I went home, it had started drizzling. Well, I didn't even know what was on the ground. But I had a 9 o'clock doctor's appointment, and it was the cardiologist in Kirkwood. So I'm lying in bed thinking, what can I tell them? If I tell them I have a fever, that's it.
Okay.
That cancels the appointment.
Okay.
So I call them, and I said, before I use my made-up excuse that I was going to use,
Sure.
so I fully intended
Okay.
to lie, which is kind of cheating them out of their time.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, you
No,
together.
because what I'm hearing for is the consent.
Think we got him.
No, I'm here.
Well,
I'm here for the
So
consent.
what happened was, before I could say anything, she said, oh yeah, would you like to reschedule your appointment or do a video? What the heck do I want to do a video conference with a cardiologist? I want to take my heart rate.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, oh, I'd like to reschedule. So then I saw that they had sent me a message to call them
Okay.
because they were going to ask me that
Okay.
beforehand.
Right.
But I fully intended to lie.
Did you fully, like, so in other words though, did you consent by doing it?
By doing,
By lying.
I didn't have to.
You didn't actually have to, right? So in some ways,
But I
God,
didn't pay attention to.
well, maybe in some ways, though, God saved you that. Now, was it a sin to intend? Yeah. Was it a mortal sin though? There was never consent. You never actually did it.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think in that respect, you could say maybe you had a sin of thought, but you didn't have a sin of action, in which case it would not necessarily be mortal. Right. Right. Because in order to actually sin, mortal sin, you have to actually do it. Right. Actually have to commit the sin.
Yeah.
And you didn't because you didn't get the
But
opportunity.
that is something I have done forever. And it's I guess maybe a lack of self-confidence or something, but if I'm going to be late for a meeting or even a dinner date, I'm casting around on the highway to find an accident so I can say, oh, there was an accident on the highway.
Well, that wouldn't be lying if there were. I mean, so that's what I mean.
Yeah,
so
but
maybe hoping for something.
Giving the impression that I was right behind it.
Well, okay, there's a difference between.
But I do that.
Well, there's a difference between lying and deception. There is.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So in other words, sometimes, now granted, those times are pretty clear. Deception is warranted, right? And would not be sinful. Now, that's not the same as lying. So the classic example would be
it's also not the same as apologizing.
True, but for instance, a good example that would be Saint Athanasius. So 2nd century, no wait, first century saint. Yes. He was basically exiled by the governor, exiled by the emperor. He was really the only one that was upholding orthodoxy in the entire world. So he was being ostracized for his faith in the Catholic Church. And because of that, he was being kicked out of the empire. Now, what that basically meant was you're basically put in exile and you die, right? So he was trying to escape his captors. He was traveling down the Nile. And this Roman legion is on the barge following him. They're getting closer and closer. Well, the centurion calls out to Athanasius, "Have you seen Athanasius?" To which Athanasius replied, "Keep going, you're very close." So they went right by him. He got off to the next point, maintained his freedom, right? Didn't lie. Didn't lie.
Oh, I can't wait to tell my brother.
Right? No, but in that respect, because his life was in danger, deception was warranted, but he still can't lie. So, I mean, so in other words, I mean, in that respect too, let's say, oh boy, I'm really late for this, and okay, well, there is an accident. Well, there was an accident. That wouldn't be lying, right?
Yeah. Oh, boy. You're smooth.
Well, this is ethics 101. That's what I mean. The other example they give us is from World War II. So if you were, let's say, if you were a French family that were hiding a Jewish family, and the Nazis come to your door, are you hiding Jews here? Well, why would I be hiding Jews here?
Okay, well,
Right.
that brings me to another question. You have time?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. Okay, so a plenary indulgence, can it be offered to someone who isn't even Catholic or someone who, so it's good for sins that were confessed and sins that were not for the temporal punishment?
Wait, for you or for someone else?
No, for someone else.
Yeah, no, you can have the intention of temporal punishment for anybody.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. You have plenty of those be intended for anybody. Now, it probably makes more sense though to do it for someone that's already dead.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Now you can do it for the living too, but it makes more sense for
They're
those
just
of
gonna
deceased.
go out and sin
Well,
tomorrow.
that's the thing, right?
You know
Yeah,
how
so,
they are.
yeah, right. So yeah, is it wasted? No, but it's probably better. It can actually free someone from purgatory right away, right?
Okay, now another thing I never heard of.
Mhm.
And, I have been a Catholic. I found out this phrase, cradle Catholic.
Mhm.
I never heard of an apostolic absolution.
Apostolic pardon.
Pardon.
Mhm.
Do you have to ask for it or someone have to ask for it, or do you automatically give it?
So this is why the sacrament of anointing the sick is so confused, right? So in the administration of viaticum, right, which is also known as extreme unction, right? Last rites.
That's what we called it.
Viaticum is the sacrament of confession, if applicable. Like, so if someone's unconscious, you can't necessarily do that. Anointing of the sick, and if possible, communion, right? And so even a small crumb, we try to give communion. That's right. At the end of which, within those sacraments being administered, there is a point where the priest, whether at the penitential rite or at the end, gives what we call the apostolic pardon. And so what the apostolic pardon is, it's a immediate plenary indulgence, regardless of the circumstances, and provided that the person that's going to be administered didn't have an abject refusal of the faith or something. So let's say right before someone goes into the confesses, like, I hate the church and I can't stand it. Okay, you still could apply in that respect, but as far as the reception of it, that's kind of the individual, right? So that's we'll be very clear about that.
But if they're unconscious
if
or
they're unconscious,
demented,
or in a state where they can't have
yeah,
the faculties,
yeah.
that would apply to them. And at the moment of their death, they would go straight to heaven.
Well,
Because it remits all temporal punishment from sin.
because one of the things that I don't know that I'll ever get over, and I've prayed for any punishment to be on me. When my mom went in the hospital the last time, the hospital people can't tell you this is a waste of her the rest of her life. She's not getting up.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that. It went on for about 3 days. They had shocked her 3 times. But when I said, they were giving her every medicine there was to keep her blood pressure up. And she was septic. And I was just stunned. And just sitting there for 3 days. And during the 3 days, I didn't call for a priest and I didn't call for the sacrament. Now, she was very much Catholic all of her life. But the thought that I was the one in the way, I mean, my brothers and sisters, my sister and sister-in-law and brothers came and my cousins came, but I didn't do that. And we knew because the cardiologist came to me and he said, it's time. So I called my sister-in-law who knew it was time. I called and said, could you get everybody here by 11 o'clock? She said, we'll be there at 10:30. Okay. She got the family together and I called some cousins and I didn't even think of it, Father. I didn't.
Yeah. Well, the saving grace for your mom, though, is if she was practicing, she may not have needed it.
But from what I understand from the diary of Sister Faustina,
Right.
Saint Faustina, that Christ was very sensitive to even small things.
Right. But I think also too, what we also understand is that there are such things as sacraments by desire. And the fact that your mom was a regular participant in the mass, was a regular communicant, it definitely would indicate that there was a desire there. And so even that desire for those things, even if it wasn't applied in reality, the grace, God would still fulfill that grace in life to come. Because even though God works within the sacraments, he's not bound by them, right? So that's why we understand that all the sacraments can be received by desire, except for holy orders. So that's why when I tell people, I had a situation where kind of similar. There was a husband, he died relatively quickly. I mean he was older, but they didn't really expect him to go that quick. And it just kind of slipped their mind. So everything happened so fast, they weren't really sure. Also, sometimes there's probably a fear that it's almost kind of facing the end by having the priest there. It's sort of like, oh no, this is it, right?
Well, with my dad, he had a heart attack 2 weeks before Christmas. And then they didn't this was 63, they did not let children come to the hospital. And I kind of like to think there was special grace for him because they had remodeled the hospital and the ICU, cardiac ICU he was in was where we were all born. That had been the delivery suites. Where 5 of us, one died.
Right.
And that's where he was. Well, they told us we could come and see him on Christmas. And so the Sunday before we had to get everything ready for the week. And mom went in the afternoon and she was coming home in the evening. Well, she didn't come home. So my aunts, 2 of them came and got 2 of us each. And so they brought us back and put us to bed. And Mom and my Aunt Jane came at 5 in the morning. And my uncles and more aunts were at the hospital and he died as soon as she left. And she had hired a private nurse to be with him at all times. And she said, Miss Scherzinger, he waited until you left. He wanted you to at least have a couple hours sleep. And she said he told the priest because he did have extreme unction. And he joked with the priest. So I mean, he was fully cognizant and he knew it was the end.
Right.
And because in those days, if you lived 2 weeks, you might live.
Right.
But that was it.
Yeah, right. And
he told the priest if he only had a cigarette, he'd be a new man.
I think those circumstances.
Second to absolution.
That's right.
If only he could have a cigarette.
That's okay.
But yeah, and I feel kind of superstitious about this, but my aunt, my godmother, got in bed, mom's bed with me, and mom was on the couch, and I just didn't breathe because I didn't want to disturb her. I was that shy even with her. And I just watched the clock and cried. And I remember the last I saw was 5:15. That's when he died. So I don't know.
No, I think what you're, obviously that's a very powerful thing when a priest is there to provide that absolution, that.
And I think it was our parish priest.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But
so
but also too, I mean, I think the other thing too to understand, and this is where it starts getting, dangerous. We also trust in God's love and mercy. And especially for someone who lived their faith.
Oh yeah.
God would surely supply the grace that we desired at the moment of death for those things.
Well,
so I wouldn't worry about that because I think your mom was taken care of.
Oh, I can't even say anything about purgatory to my neighbor. She gets mad. Your mother? How can you? Well, they were people.
Sure.
But they suffered greatly. He was in state hospital for 7 years. And their problems were external to their marriage. They were solid as a rock.
Yeah.
And in fact, she said, I should have let her take it with her, but I just couldn't bear it. She told my neighbor, she said, I wear this ring because I still feel married to him. And that was 55 years later. But I took her jewelry in the hospital. And I put the ring on her when they didn't unplug her, they stopped the medicine. Then I took it back. I said, you can go to heaven with it on. But you're not going in the ground.
You can't take it with you anyway.
Oh, you can now.
What?
My aunt and uncle, they bought for my uncle Jack a casket. Oh, it was mahogany. And oh my gosh, it was so gorgeous. I told my brother, I said, if anybody buys me a casket like that, dump me in the grave and make an entertainment center out of it. But then they got one for my aunt.
Okay.
Well, they put all kinds of stuff in my uncle's, his pouch of money for playing cards and stuff like that. Well, for my Aunt Jean, it had, the bottom half is closed. That facing part, had a drawer in it. So they must have changed the rules.
I think, well, in some ways I could just be like, we don't do the stuff, might as well bury it with them. But we don't know what to do with all this stuff, might as well bury it with them. But the other side of the coin too is this kind of makes it easier for grave robbers too.
Oh my gosh. Well, this was just his coins for and Bill whispered to my cousin Tom, his son, Jack's son. I replaced.
Well,
nothing's too sacrilegious for Bill.
We thank you all for joining us tonight. It was a good session, I think, and we'll see you guys next week. We'll have Friends, Food, and Faith, and we'll talk about why we need church. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.